Hi guys, this is the second video from my 6D Mark II and 6D comparison. Link for the first video in which I analyzed image quality can be found in the description below. Now it's time to discuss everything else and to draw some conclusions. In terms of size and shape, these cameras are basically identical. There are some slight differences, but they will be visible only to long-term users like myself. Grip is slightly deeper, maybe just 1 or 2 mm, and a few buttons feel a bit different. 5 buttons on the top protrude a bit more, and the plastic is a bit differently shaped around play and magnify buttons. Front dial has a bit more resistance and is louder when rotated. I very much prefer the one on older model. Only button addition is the focus point button just between front dial and shutter button. Otherwise, these two cameras feel identical, which is a good thing, as anyone upgrading to the new model will feel at home right from the first moment. Ergonomics is overall pretty much perfect. Canon is still my favorite brand when it comes to grip shape and control placement. 6D Mark II can be controlled almost entirely with just one hand, as all the controls are on the right side. This includes main menu system, as the menu button can be assigned to central multi-way button. Weight is nearly identical, a few grams here or there changes nothing. Both cameras have a certain degree of weather sealing. I have used original 6D in rain and snow, dusty and hot conditions, and it never failed, so I guess new model will be at least as good. On the bottom, tripod mount is far away from battery compartment, no problems with larger tripod plates. And take a look at this small detail, both are labeled as made in Japan. Some people like to see that. On paper, 6D Mark II brings 60p recording and dual pixel autofocus, but loses intra-frame compression. In daylight, 6D Classic doesn't look particularly good. It has problems with moire and aliasing. Notice weird artifacts on sharp edges of buildings. 6D Mark II has no such problems, but with identical picture parameters looks soft. Here is 80D, which looks best in my opinion. There is no moire, no weird compression artifacts, and appears a bit sharper than 6D Mark II. It is also half the price, so for now 80D is in lead. Low light changes things. At ISO 12800, 6D doesn't look good. Mark II is significantly cleaner, so yes, this has improved a lot. 80D with its small sensor sadly cannot compete here. Biggest difference is the dual pixel autofocus and articulated LCD, and those two alone are worth the upgrade if you shoot a lot of videos. But they are also available on 80D at once again half the price. If you don't need high ISO in video often, I think 80D is the best video camera from Canon right now. Both cameras have normal and silent shutter release. I have a feeling old model is just by a fraction quieter. I don't know how much of this can be heard in video. As for continuous shooting, old model topped out at 4.5 frames per second, and the buffer could swallow 13 shots in RAW or only 21 in JPEG format. New Mark II shoots at speedy 6.5 frames per second and has significantly bigger buffer, 21 for RAW and impressive 170 in JPEG format. For anyone shooting sports, this is a welcomed update. Auto ISO control has more options on the new model. For manual lowest shutter speed you can now select values all the way to 1/4000th of a second. Previous model topped out at 1/250th of a second. If left in auto mode, there is a possibility to choose between 7 levels to force it to pick lower or higher shutter speeds if you want that. Focusing system got a significant jump from 11 to 45 focus points. New focus system is basically the same from ATD, with the exception you can select smaller spot AF area on each individual AF point. But the problem is in frame coverage. While on crop sensor ATD this 45-point AF system covers good deal of the frame, it is a bit too small for full frame, so all focus points are cramped in the middle. On 6D Classic, only the center point was cross-type. Now all of them are what translates to more accuracy and speed for outer points. As for low light focusing, 6D Classic was one of the most sensitive cameras on the market, being able to focus in -3 EV using its central point. This remains unchanged in the Mark II. Only center point is so good in low light. And good it is. Both 6D and 6D Mark II are capable of locking focus in situations I myself have a trouble seeing what's in front of me. Spot metering is not linked with active focus point. It always measures light in the center of the frame. LCD units are identical in size and resolution. Viewing quality is basically perfect on both cameras. Where 6D Mark II has an advantage is articulation. Great stuff for low-angle shots, video recording, and of course it can be closed to protect it, what I find very important. Here is how my 6D LCD looks after 4 years of use. I am usually careful when handling my gear, but this thing is properly scratched. With the Mark II this will be possible to avoid to a certain degree if you regularly close LCD in transport or when the camera is hanging around your neck. Any rubbing against the shirt or jacket might potentially scratch it over time. And of course, Mark II has touch control, which is active for all camera functions, from live view shooting, video, menus, quick menu settings up to playback. Dual touch is supported. Beside the addition of a few icons like Bluetooth or time-lapse interval timer, status LCDs are identical. Both are backlit with orange light. Optical viewfinder is identical in size on both cameras, which means large and bright. Still, there are some major changes. Now it has overlays like ATD and 5D Mark IV. You can activate electronic level at the top of the viewfinder. 6D had it also, but it was a bit crude as it used exposure indicator panel, required extra button press to activate, and worked for horizontal horizon only. Mark II is active as soon as you press shutter button halfway and can show up or down tilt beside the usual left and right angle. Next, you can activate this grid to help you with alignment. Only way to get these lines in 6D Classic is to buy another focusing screen and install it as I did. All the icons at the bottom are also new, you can enable or disable any of them separately. Overlay is also great for anyone shooting other than native 3:2 ratio. When selected in menu, 6D Mark II can show crop marks to help you with framing, what is excellent stuff. Both cameras use the same battery, as is the case with all Canon high-end bodies for some time already. It is strong enough for around 1000 shots out of a single charge in average use. Video recording and live view will make that number smaller. Restraining from use of LCD altogether will bring the number up to even several thousands. External charger is part of the retail package. There is no USB charging on this camera. There is only one SD memory card slot. UHS 2 cards are not supported. Connectors are identical on both 6D generations. Mini USB 2.0, HDMI output, 3.5mm microphone input and N3 connector for wired remote control. I am a bit disappointed there is no USB 3.0 and headphones output. Just like on 80D, microphone input is out of the way of LCD. It can be fully rotated with the microphone plugged in. GPS is still here with the usual interval update settings and the option to record log file, which can be overlaid on maps or satellite images in most programs including Google Earth. What is new is the option to reduce battery consumption when the camera power switch is in the off position. Some users reported battery drain on 6D Classic. Personally, I never experienced that issue. Identical on both cameras. Clean and simple. Mark II has touch interface though, so it is easier to directly pick desired setting instead of scrolling with buttons. Beside the fact there are more options and that they are grouped in sub-tabs, nothing has changed. Tabs are color-coded and features have logical placement. This is schoolbook example how to make easy to navigate and visually pleasing menu system. Last tab is reserved for user to assign often used settings for easy access. While old model had only one tab with up to 6 settings, Mark II can have up to 5 tabs with 6 items each. If you have BGE13 grip from your old 6D lying around, you can throw it away, because it doesn't fit on the new Mark II. Thank you Canon for providing us with the opportunity to buy a new one. So what to say for the end? Mark II is clearly improved in some areas while it stagnates or even performs worse in other. For some users, higher burst and bigger buffer, articulated LCD, built-in time-lapse and a few other additions might be enough to upgrade. It is also a much better choice for video than the 6D Classic. The problem is that those improvements are only as good as it was absolutely essential. There is no desire from Canon to make this camera truly exceptional. Many of us expected 4K video without significant crop, headphones output, double card slot, wider focusing point coverage in optical finder and dynamic range at least as good as 80D. But no, that would cannibalize 5D Mark IV sales according to Canon. Yet even the Mark IV is a sort of compromise as it has no proper video, since Canon wants to protect their EOS cinema cameras. That being said, keep in mind 6D Classic got similar criticism when it came out in 2012, yet it survived 5 years on the market and sold quite well. In fact, it is one of the longest running Canon models ever. It might be possible the new one does something similar, as it has solid feature set and a combination of full-frame sensor and dual-pixel focusing, which is still the most reliable one on the market. For anyone wanting to upgrade from Rebel series or some older camera, this might be all they need. But for those of us who already have 6D Classic or 80D or anything similar, the new 6D Mark II brings nothing of interest. At the same or even lower price point there is Nikon D750 and Sony Alpha 7 if you want proper dynamic range. In fact, even the Canon 80D blows the 6D Mark II out of the water in terms of low ISO dynamic range at half the price. Video users are probably better off with Panasonic G9 and GH5. Heck, even Fuji X-T2 has better looking video than 6D Mark II. Fuji! Jesus! Sport shooters should take a look at Nikon D500, 7D Mark II, Panasonic G9 or Olympus EM1 Mark II, which shoot up to 60 frames per second in RAW format and has superb weather sealing. And finally, a good deal of these cameras have 5-axis in-body stabilization, making them hand-holdable at shutter speeds Canon can only dream of and stabilize video to the extent not even remotely achievable by lens stabilization in Canon lenses. Altogether, it's not a bad camera, but it is far from what many of us expected.